Anxiety does not begin when your heart is racing. It begins much earlier, in a silent moment most people ignore, the instant your mind starts scanning for what could go wrong instead of staying with what is actually happening. That shift is subtle, almost invisible, but it changes everything. Your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. So when your thoughts move into what-if mode, your nervous system prepares for survival. Muscles tighten, breathing shortens, focus narrows, energy mobilizes, and if this happens often enough, your system forgets how to stand down. You wake up already tired. You feel pressure without a clear reason. Your mind jumps ahead of you, rehearsing conversations, predicting mistakes, anticipating judgment. It feels like responsibility, like preparation, like being alert. But in reality, it is continuous activation. And continuous activation drains you more than effort ever could. Here is the truth that changes the game. Anxiety is not a force you overpower. It is a process you interrupt. Most people try to solve anxiety at the level of thought content. They argue with their mind, try to replace negative ideas with positive ones, search for reassurance or demand certainty. But anxiety is not sustained by logic errors alone. It is sustained by internal speed. When your system accelerates, your thoughts accelerate with it. And fast thoughts feel convincing even when they are distorted. So the first code to weaken anxiety is not mental, it is biological. The moment you notice activation, even mild, you shift from thinking to regulating. You stop trying to fix the story and instead influence the system running underneath the story. Because anxiety always rides on physiology. Without physical momentum, mental spirals cannot maintain intensity. You start with the simplest and most powerful lever available, the breath. Not deep breathing, not forced calm. Just one structural change. The exhale becomes slightly longer than the inhale. This matters because your nervous system reads breath rhythm as a survival signal. Fast, short breaths say danger. Slow, extended exhales say safety. When the exhale lengthens, heart rate begins to decelerate, muscle tension drops slightly, and the brain receives a message. No immediate threat detected. You are not calming yourself emotionally. You are updating your system through biology. At the same time, you bring awareness to a physical anchor, the weight of your feet on the floor, the contact of your back against the chair, the sensation of your hands resting somewhere solid. Anxiety pulls attention into imagined futures. Anchoring pulls attention into present sensation. The body trusts sensation more than imagination. And here is the key. You do not try to eliminate the anxious feeling. Trying to eliminate it signals danger. Instead, you allow it to exist while you change the internal conditions that support it. You might still feel the tension, the restlessness, the energy. But now it is no longer accelerating. It is contained, stabilized, and stabilization is the foundation of control. If this already sounds different from what you usually do, pause for a moment and notice that. Most people have never been taught to work with the system underneath their thoughts. Just becoming aware of this layer shifts your relationship with anxiety. And if this perspective is helping you see your reactions in a new light, take a moment later to share your experience in the comments. Articulating it helps the pattern solidify in your own mind. Once the body's urgency begins to decrease, the second code becomes available. This one works at the level of interpretation. Because anxiety does not grow only from sensations, it grows from what you believe those sensations mean. Your chest tightens and the mind says, something is wrong. Your heart beats fast and the mind says, I'm losing control. Your thoughts speed up and the mind says, I can't handle this. Now you're not just activated, you are afraid of the activation itself. That second layer is what turns discomfort into panic. So the second code is classification. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening?" you state internally, calmly and neutrally, "This is my nervous system activated." Not as comfort, as description. Your brain is always searching for meaning. If you do not give it one, it invents a catastrophic one. But when you label the experience accurately, uncertainty drops, and when uncertainty drops, perceived danger drops with it. This is my nervous system activated. That sentence creates distance. Instead of "I am in danger," the frame becomes "a process is happening." Processes rise and fall. They do not define you. They do not last forever. Then you add one more crucial shift. You stop resisting the sensation. Resistance signals threat. Allowing signals safety. You can even say internally, "uncomfortable but not dangerous." This distinction is powerful. Discomfort is survivable. Danger demands emergency. Anxiety peaks and falls naturally when not fueled by catastrophic meaning. Like a wave, it rises, crests, and recedes. But if you fight the wave, you create turbulence. These two codes remove the turbulence. Over time, your system learns a new association. Activation does not automatically equal catastrophe. The more often this happens, the less intense future spikes become. You are teaching your nervous system through experience, not argument. If this understanding is starting to make your internal world feel more structured and less mysterious, stay with this process. Reflect on one recent anxious moment and imagine applying these steps there. That mental rehearsal strengthens the pathway you are building, and continuing to explore how your mind actually works gives you something anxiety hates most: clarity. When you begin applying these codes consistently, something subtle but profound shifts inside you. Anxiety no longer feels like a sudden invasion. It starts to feel like a familiar pattern, a sequence your system runs when it detects uncertainty. And the moment a pattern becomes recognizable, it becomes influenceable. Before, anxiety felt fused with you. A thought appeared and instantly became truth. A sensation rose and instantly became danger. There was no space between the signal and your reaction. But now, a small gap begins to form. In that gap, choice lives. And that is where regulation becomes possible. Anxiety depends on speed and fusion. It wants your thoughts, sensations, and identity to merge into one urgent experience. I feel this becomes, "This is happening to me," which becomes, "I am in danger." But when you slow the physiology and classify the sensation, you interrupt that fusion. The experience becomes something you are observing, not something you are drowning in. This shift changes the entire emotional equation. You may still feel waves of anxiety, but now instead of immediately trying to escape or control them, you respond with process, breath, anchor, classification, allowing. These steps form a stabilizing loop that replaces the old spiral. And something important happens when you stop fearing the sensation itself. Secondary fear, fear of the anxiety, is often what sustains the cycle. What if this doesn't stop? Why am I like this? This shouldn't be happening. These thoughts add threat to the original activation. When you respond with neutrality instead of alarm, the second layer never forms. Anxiety without secondary fear is far less powerful. Over time, your nervous system begins to learn from repetition. Each time you experience activation and remain present without escalation, you provide evidence of safety. The brain updates its predictions based on experience, not intention. You are literally retraining the system's expectations about what activation means. You might notice that spikes become shorter, recovery becomes faster. The intensity curve lowers. This is not because anxiety has vanished from human experience. It is because your response no longer feeds it. Another quiet change appears in how your mind feels between anxious moments. Thoughts move with less urgency. Attention feels less fragmented. Decisions feel less pressured. Anxiety consumes enormous mental bandwidth. When that drain decreases, clarity returns naturally. This clarity affects more than just anxious episodes. Conversations feel less loaded. Tasks feel more manageable. You respond instead of react. Energy that was tied up in constant internal monitoring becomes available again. There is also a bodily shift that develops gradually. Chronic anxiety keeps muscles slightly contracted, breath shallow, digestion altered, sleep lighter. As your system spends more time in regulation, these background tensions reduce. The body remembers how to rest. It is important to understand that progress is not linear. Some days will feel easier, others heavier. That does not erase change. Old patterns may still activate strongly under stress. The skill is not to prevent activation, but to meet it the same way every time. Consistency teaches the nervous system more than intensity ever could. You may even notice that you start detecting anxiety earlier, at subtler levels. This is not regression, it is increased awareness. The sooner you recognize the pattern, the easier it is to apply the codes before the system fully accelerates. There is also an identity shift unfolding here. Many people unconsciously tie their sense of responsibility to worry. They believe that if they stop worrying, they will become careless. But worry is repetitive anticipation without action. Responsibility involves clear action and then disengagement. Anxiety keeps you in endless mental rehearsal without resolution. As you practice these codes, you learn that calm does not mean indifference. Calm means your system is not wasting survival energy on simulations. A regulated mind is more capable, not less. If you are recognizing yourself in these patterns, take a moment to observe how differently you now understand anxious moments. That understanding is not abstract, it is leverage. And if this perspective is helping you feel more capable in your own mind, reflect on it, share it, and continue exploring it. The more familiar these processes become, the less mysterious anxiety feels. And what is less mysterious is always less threatening. As this new way of responding becomes more practiced, you start to notice something that once seemed impossible. Anxiety no longer dictates the direction of your inner world. It may still knock, but it no longer kicks the door open. There is a pause now, a fraction of space between activation and interpretation. And in that space, you are no longer reacting from survival mode. You are responding from awareness. This shift reduces something deeper than tension. It reduces helplessness. One of the most exhausting aspects of anxiety is not the sensations themselves, but the feeling that they control you. When you see that there is a sequence you can follow, that helplessness weakens. And when helplessness weakens, fear loses fuel. You begin to understand that anxiety is not random chaos. It is a patterned response to uncertainty, prediction, and internal acceleration. Once you understand the pattern, you stop personalizing every spike. It is not, "What is wrong with me?" It becomes, "My system detected uncertainty and activated." That change in language alters emotional impact. You may also notice that anxiety tries to return through urgency. It says, "This time is different. This is more serious. You have to solve this now." But urgency is part of the pattern itself. When you recognize that, you do not argue with the thought, you return to the process. Breath, anchor, classification, allowing. You answer speed with steadiness. Steadiness is something anxiety cannot maintain intensity against for long. There is also a growing tolerance inside you. Not forced endurance, but the ability to experience strong sensations without escalating. Tolerance builds when the system learns that intensity does not equal catastrophe. Each time a wave rises and falls without disaster, the nervous system adjusts its threshold. Future waves feel less threatening because you have experienced survival through them. This tolerance changes how you approach life itself. Situations that once triggered immediate worry begin to feel workable. Challenges remain, but the background alarm is quieter. You have more room to think clearly, to choose actions instead of reacting impulsively. Another subtle change is your relationship with thoughts. You begin to see that a thought is an event, not a directive. It passes through awareness like a sound passes through space. You can hear it without following it. This reduces mental load dramatically, not because thoughts disappear, but because they no longer demand immediate obedience. You may also notice moments of calm that once went unnoticed. Small pockets of steadiness, brief pauses where your body feels neutral, your mind unpressured. Paying attention to these moments reinforces them. The brain learns from what you notice, not just what you manage under stress. All of this leads to a quieter kind of confidence. Not the loud certainty that nothing will go wrong, but the grounded trust that you can handle internal shifts when they arise. Confidence built this way is stable because it is based on experience, not assumption. It is important to remember that this process does not eliminate emotion. You will still feel stress, uncertainty, anticipation. The difference is flexibility. You can move into activation and back into regulation without getting stuck. Flexibility is resilience. As resilience grows, anxiety loses its central role. It becomes one experience among many, not the background of your life. Energy that was once tied up in constant internal monitoring becomes available for presence, focus, and connection. Keep returning to the basics. Slightly longer exhale, physical grounding, neutral labeling, allowing without resistance. These are simple actions, but repetition gives them power. Small regulatory choices accumulate into large systemic change. If you can sense that your internal world feels more understandable, more navigable than before, acknowledge that shift. Change often begins quietly, as clarity before calm, and continuing to apply these codes turns clarity into stability over time. There is a final shift that happens when these practices stop being techniques and start becoming your default way of relating to anxiety. You no longer wait for the storm to pass. You know how to stand inside it without being carried away. That changes not only how anxiety feels, but how life feels. Before, anxiety compressed your world. Your focus narrowed to threats. Your body stayed braced. Your thoughts ran ahead of you. Even in neutral moments, part of your system was preparing for something that might go wrong. That background preparation is exhausting. It drains energy you could use to think, create, connect, and rest. When you consistently regulate first and interpret second, that background tension begins to dissolve. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. Your nervous system spends more time in states of safety, and safety is where restoration happens. You start to notice the difference in simple ways. Mornings feel slightly less heavy. Your breath settles more easily. You recover faster after stress. Conversations feel less like performance and more like exchange. You are not pushing yourself through every moment. You are moving with more internal space. And here is something most people never realize. Anxiety narrows perception, but regulation widens it. When the survival system quiets, you perceive more nuance, more options, more perspective. Problems do not disappear, but they stop feeling like immediate threats to your existence. That alone reduces mental pressure. There is also a change in how you relate to uncertainty. Before, uncertainty automatically triggered prediction and rehearsal. Now, uncertainty can exist without immediate mental simulation. You do not have to solve the future in advance. That frees enormous cognitive energy. This does not make you passive, it makes you more precise. When action is needed, you act. When thinking is useful, you think. But you no longer live in continuous rehearsal. Your system stops preparing for every possible outcome and starts responding to what is actually happening. Over time, this builds a quiet trust in yourself, not because you are sure nothing difficult will happen, but because you have experienced yourself staying present through internal activation. That memory becomes evidence, and evidence is stronger than reassurance. You may still have anxious moments. That is human. The difference is that those moments no longer define your internal climate. They become passing weather. You feel them, respond with the process, and watch them move through. The system returns to balance more naturally. What once felt like losing control becomes a signal to apply structure. And structure is what anxiety cannot compete with. Anxiety thrives in confusion, speed, and catastrophic meaning. You answer with rhythm, grounding, and neutral classification. Biology, attention, interpretation. That sequence changes the entire cascade. If you look back, you might notice that what changed most is not the world around you, but the way your system moves through it. Life may still be complex. Demands may still exist, but your internal response has more stability, more flexibility, more space. And that space is where real control lives. Not control over every outcome, but control over how your system reacts to what it predicts. That is the difference between being carried by anxiety and being able to stand while it passes. If this perspective has helped you see your anxious experiences in a new, more workable way, take a moment to let that land. Understanding creates leverage. Practice creates change. And continuing to work with your system instead of against it turns anxiety from an overwhelming force into a manageable signal. One you know exactly how to answer.